In this section, we'll look at the 1964 presidential election. While Johnson sought to win his first presidential election, the Republicans met to decide their candidate at the Cow Palace in Daly City, California in mid-July 1964. It was only the second Republican convention on the West Coast. It was a clear indication that they saw the growing population of the West Coast as fertile ground for their party. At the Republican convention, there was a split between the moderates and the conservatives. The moderates wanted Nelson Rockefeller, the governor of New York, but Rockefeller had divorced his wife the previous year and quickly married another woman, who then gave birth just under a year later and right before the convention. This didn't appeal to the conservatives, who saw Rockefeller as a bit libertine socially. There had, after all, never been a divorced president. Some moderates began to say that Rockefeller was so flawed that they wanted to draft another candidate, and they went after Governor William Scranton of Pennsylvania. But ultimately that effort failed, and Rockefeller was the running against Goldwater. The moderates' problems caused the nomination of Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater, the first real hard right candidate of the Republican Party in a long time. Moderates like Eisenhower only belatedly and reluctantly endorsed him. Of course, we've talked about the split in the Republican Party in the past. You tend to think of, for example, Robert Taft as being a hard right Republican and Thomas Dewey as being more liberal. Well, Goldwater is often considered the birth of the modern conservative movement. They tended to be much more ideologically anti-government. They saw big federal government as kind of always bad, and they were strictly anti-communist. Goldwater was known as somewhat of an extremist. For example, he wanted to get rid of Social Security, and most famously, he suggested that the nuclear bomb should be in the hands not of the president, but in the hands of military commanders. In the general elections, the Democrats took advantage of Goldwater's perceived extremism. The Democrats posted a very famous campaign commercial, probably one of the most famous of all times. It's called the Daisy Girl commercial. It showed a cute little girl picking flowers going 10, 9, 8, 7, and then all of a sudden there's a nuclear bomb when she gets to 0. And it suggested that, if you elect Goldwater, you're going to have nuclear war. The ad was pulled, but really resonated. In the campaign, the Republicans tried to respond. They had a phrase, "In your heart, you know he's right." The trouble was that the Goldwater was just not with the times. He, for example, was against the Civil Rights Act. He wasn't personally racist. He had marched with some of the African American civil rights leaders, but he didn't think it was the role of the federal government to be pushing civil rights. It was a states' rights issue. When the election results came in on November 3rd, 1964, 61% of the popular vote went to Lyndon Johnson. It was the highest percentage of the popular vote since they really first started reporting it in 1824. The Electoral College was a thumping as well, 486 to 52. In Congress, it was pretty much a rout as well. The Senate picked up 2 seats for a commanding 68 seats. That, of course, was a filibuster-proof majority. In the House, they picked up 37 seats, which meant they had a majority of 295 to 140. They had twice as many seats. As a sidebar, future President George Herbert Walker Bush first ran from Congress from Texas, but lost. The Democrats meant that the victory meant that Johnson had a lot of power in the new Congress. It's interesting to note that outside of carrying Arizona, his home state, Barry Goldwater carried 5 Deep South states. And keep in mind that Goldwater was Republican, and the South was the bastion of the Democratic Party historically. And so this is the beginning of a shift where Southern voters begin to move to the Republican Party, which of course the South is the Republican Party's strength today. In any event, the landslide victory for Johnson, he knew that he had to get going quickly with his legislation. He famously said, "In a year, landslide Lyndon will be lame duck Lyndon." So get that legislation on up to Congress. This concludes the section on the 1964 presidential election.